Hello, welcome back to our series on early modern philosophy. My name is Andy, I'm a philosophy lecturer, and today we are continuing to talk about Spinoza. We started with Spinoza last time, and now we have the second part. Last time we talked a little bit about the general idea of Spinoza's life and the main points of his philosophy, and there are two main ideas Spinoza stands for. The first is determinism. Everything in the world is determined. There is no freedom. We have to do whatever the universe is doing anyway. We cannot choose how to act. And we will see a little later how this works. And the second idea is that there is only one substance in the universe, and this is God. So everything, nature, we, all things that we see around us, all these things are part of God. So this is a pantheistic or panentheistic point of view, which says that God is not a separate thing from us, but God is actually all around. God, we are part of God, right? Nature is part of God. And so God is everywhere. And today we want to see briefly how Spinoza does this. How does he motivate this idea that God is everywhere? And it all begins with Descartes. And perhaps if you want to go back in the other videos we talk about Descartes, I also, by the way, let me mention, I have a newsletter called Daily Philosophy on Substack. So if you look up on the internet, if you Google Daily Philosophy and Substack, you will find it. And this Substack is a philosophy magazine where every week we publish articles from well-known authors, philosophers, who explain philosophical topics and discuss them and show how they can be applied to everyday life. Recently we had an article actually about Descartes' meditations, which you may find interesting if you always wondered, what Descartes' meditations are about. I also have another channel called Daily Philosophy here on YouTube, and there you will also find a reading group, which I have every Sunday evening or Monday morning, depending where your time zone is. And there we read Descartes and Spinoza. We recently finished reading Descartes. Now we are reading Spinoza. This is 1 hour per week, and it's free, and you are welcome to join us. And we can talk about it and ask questions in the chat. And then we try together to understand what the reading is saying. So with Spinoza now, the point is that he begins with Descartes, and Descartes famously had this distinction where he said that mind and body are two totally different substances. They cannot be compared. They are of a totally different nature because mind has thought, which is a primary attribute of mind, while the body, by which he means not only the human body, but he means, all body things, physical nature. Physical things have extension. This means that when I have a physical thing, a book or whatever, it has a length, it has a width, it has a weight. These are all properties of extension. And my thoughts don't have this, right? My thought does not have a particular length. So I cannot talk of my thought, my mind having extension. But my mind has the attribute of thought. And again, this is specific to my mind, and no other thing has thought, right? He thought. My microphone doesn't have thought, and my whatever else, my t-shirt doesn't have thought. They have an extension, but they don't have thought. And so we have this one attribute, which is the defining attribute of the thing. And this is for the mind thought, and for all physical things, it is extension. And in this way, these two are totally different, and they can never come together, they can never interact. This is why also, in a Christian sense, and Descartes was a Christian, when I am dead, then my physical body will decay, it will stay where it is, it will go underground, right? But my mind will not die with the physical body. My mind, my soul then will go on in its Christian journey, wherever. And this is also important, right, to a Christian, that the soul is not just physical. Because if it was, then our spiritual life would end with the death of the body, and this cannot be because God needs to give us reward and punishment after we are dead. So our soul needs to be still in existence in some way. So Descartes was what we call a substance dualist. He thought there are two substances. There are really three, because there's also God, who is still something separate. And so we have mind and body and God, and mind and body are totally different. Now, the problem with this, I explained it last time already, is that they cannot interact, right? If you have two totally different substances, then how can the mind move the body? And it obviously does, because I think I want to raise my hand, and now I do, I raise my hand. And why does my mind, how is it able to raise my hand if the mind and the body are totally different things? This would not be possible, right, if they were so different. So there must be something else. There must be some other way in which the mind and the body interact. And this was a problem for Descartes. It wasn't. Descartes tried to cheat his way around it, and go back again if you want to know the details, but he never solved this problem. And Spinoza begins there, and he says the only way they can interact logically is if they are the same substance. Not different, but the same. If the mind and the body, let's say they were both material things, then clearly they could interact. This is what we mostly think today, right? When we have a scientific view of the world, we would say it's all material, it's all neurons, and the neurons are physical things, and they can interact, through the biochemistry of the brain. They can create thoughts. But then if we go this way, we give up the immortal soul, right? If you're a materialist, then after you die, obviously everything is over. And you don't have a soul that goes to paradise or hell and that is going to be rewarded or punished. And so Descartes doesn't want that, and Spinoza doesn't want that. These are still religious people. They come out of the Middle Ages. They think that we must have a way to save the soul and to have God, have a role in our lives. And so this must be made to work somehow. And so Spinoza says, okay, if it was all one substance, but not material, then this would work, right? And he cannot quite do what later Berkeley did, to say it's all mind, or the universe is all mind. There is nothing material, it's all immaterial, right? This is what Berkeley says later. And we will talk about it in future episodes here. But Spinoza doesn't go that far. He takes a different turn. He says, perhaps everything is just God. And so we still have only one substance, and this substance is God or nature. And he never completely commits to how material and how spiritual the substance is. This is not important to him, but he says there is only one substance. And how do I know there's only one substance? Because if God is perfect, then God must have all attributes. Right? He must have all properties. And we know that the defining attribute of mind, according to Descartes, is thought. So if God is perfect, he must have thought. We also know that the defining attribute of the material world, of bodies, according to Descartes, is extension. So if God is perfect, he must also have extension. Otherwise he would be missing extension. He would not be perfect. Then perhaps another God who had extension would be more perfect, right? This would also not be good. So we want God to be perfect. We want him to have all the attributes. God must have thought and he must have extension. And if this is the case, then God is identical with both mind and nature, because, and here Spinoza says, you cannot have the same defining attribute in two different substances. Right? If the mind is defined by having thought, then whatever has thought is mind. And you cannot say God has thought and mind has thought and they are separate, because whatever has thought then would be the same thing, would be mind. And so God must be mind. But also, if things that have extension are automatically, defined as being body, and God has extension because he cannot be missing extension, otherwise, again, he wouldn't be perfect. So if God also has extension, then it follows that God must also be material. And so in the end, it turns out that nature is identical with God. All the phenomena in nature, mental as well as physical, mind as well as body, must be contained in God, because if they were missing, God would not be complete. God would not be perfect. But God is perfect, and therefore all these properties must be also part of God, these defining attributes. Now that's interesting because it means that everything is one substance, and this completely solves the problem that Descartes had. Now, we don't have this problem anymore. How does my mind interact with my hand? Because my mind and my hand are the same substance. It also solves lots of other problems. For example, a problem in the early modern philosophy was also, how do I perceive the world? From the outside, I see something. What happens when I see something? Today we would say, okay, it's light, waves or particles, coming into my eyes, interacting with my retina, and this causes some potential at the back of the nerves of my retina, and this electric potential gets transmitted to the brain where I, perceive things. But again, this is a purely materialistic description. Descartes and Spinoza would not have been happy with that, because then, okay, where is the thought? So I need to somehow get the sensory impression from the outside in a way that can cause my thoughts. I need to see this camera in front of me and have the thought, this is a camera. So how does this camera, cause my thought? And this is the reverse mind-body problem, right? So I'm not now puzzled about how can my thoughts move my hand. I'm puzzled about how can the camera move my thoughts and give me the idea of a camera. And this is what later Locke and Hume talked a lot about and tried to sort out how my sensory impressions can cause me to have ideas about the world, have, these perceptions that in my mind create concepts and ideas. But now for Spinoza, all this is not a problem, because the world outside is the same material as my thoughts. And he has this famous statement, the idea and the ideatum are identical. Now the ideatum is a little weird as an English word. It's a Latin word, means the thing that the idea represents. So I have the idea of a camera lens now in front of me, but there is also the camera lens itself. It's the ideatum. It's the thing that causes my idea. I see the camera lens and I have the idea of a camera lens. At least this is what, we would think if we are not very sophisticated in terms of epistemology, right? If we have a more straightforward view of how things happen, I see the lens and the image of the lens then is in my mind. And how can this be? It would be difficult if the lens was material and my mind was not material. But if idea and ideatum are identical, as Spinoza says, then this would work very well. It would work very easily, right? Because now the lens and my internal representation of the lens are actually identical, are made of the same substance, and perhaps they're even exactly the same. They are identical. So perhaps I have this lens in my mind rather than just an image of the lens. So this is a little difficult to sort out how exactly this works, because Spinoza does not have a very worked out theory of ideas. But since it's all one substance, in principle the problem disappears.